that you're gonna look great.
But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the
GymWits, GymWits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em. Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And we are the GymWits. So, did you see the fight?
I did. And the fight we are referring to is Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic.
And yeah, this is probably a couple weeks late. So if you're
by the time this posts,
by the time this posts, a few weeks late, but it's relatively fresh for us. And
yeah. And congratulations to DC for winning the heavyweight title and for holding two belts, being only the second fighter in UFC history to hold two belts at the same time.
Yeah,
and be current fighter.
Yeah, it's impressive. If you're not big on the sport, it's still a really interesting story. Cormier was a guy who was an Olympian, but due to a bad weight cut, didn't get to compete. Right? It was the one time he didn't get to compete. Right, due to a bad weight cut. He shifted over to MMA at an older age to start MMA. It was in his early to mid 30s when he started,
yep.
And he was a heavyweight when he started, and he was dominant at heavyweight. But then his teammate and one of his closest friends also fought at heavyweight, Cain Velasquez. So he actually dropped down to light heavyweight in order to allow his friend and teammate to make a run at and win and defend the title. So he was then dominant at light heavyweight, but his foil was John Jones. And so he had lost twice to John Jones, who had run into his own issues, which included steroids and arrests and drugs and all this stuff. So Cormier won the title, but in a lot of people's minds, there was kind of an asterisk next to his name because there was always John Jones. And even though he had the steroids and everything, he still beat him twice. And so for some people, they didn't want to consider him the champion. And so the fact that he was able to go up to heavyweight and finally, defeat the heavyweight champion kind of legitimized him in some people's eyes. Not me. I thought, he was light heavyweight champion. He's one of the best. He was great. John Jones is just also one of the best, if not the best, if he could get his, act together. But it was a great story and great to see him, at 39 years old. He's the baddest man on the planet, and it's really cool. And he was fighting a guy who's really tough and much bigger. Well, now he's much longer, but he didn't weigh more.
He didn't weigh more, but he's a bigger frame. Yeah.
Right? What was your prediction before the fight?
I said, you can't count DC out. I just had a feeling he was going to pull it out somehow. He just has that sort of, that metal.
Yeah.
Right now. Before we get to our interview today, which is really awesome interview, what did you think of when Brock came in? Clearly, the whole thing was staged. Brock Lesnar, the very famous professional wrestler in WWE, and also an ex-heavyweight champion. He is a legitimate fighter. You see a lot of people say, "Oh, Brock sucks." He does not suck, right? Yeah. He lost to one of the best guys. He was a heavyweight champion, right? He is, he's older now, but Brock was very, very good. In his day, he didn't last long in MMA, but he was very successful during that time period. And he ran into the ring. It was clearly staged, and they were expecting to happen. He goes in the ring, and him and Brock Lesnar and DC have this big time professional wrestling standoff where they're clearly going to promote the fight. And they're hyping it so they can get a big money fight. What do you think about this very sort of clear professional wrestling antics in the UFC?
I'm of two minds with it. I think for a long time MMA was trying to, and largely successful at legitimizing itself as a real sport, and not just between the rules, the rule changes, and mainstream media and especially sports media starting to follow it. It really did. It had a lot. It kind of had a lot of progress to make in the eyes of the public to legitimize itself, especially
it was
from
illegal and it was banned in most states at one point.
Yeah, especially from the human cockfighting days. So, so I like to see it as a legit sport, and so the problem I have is from a financial standpoint and from a fan engagement standpoint. Brock Lesnar sells. The bigger name, they're the old timers who really shouldn't be fighting but have big names. They do sell. So I understand why they're doing it. But I think it then kind of delegitimizes it because, like him or not, Brock Lesnar should be nowhere near a title shot right now. He's barely fought.
His last fight,
he got busted for steroids. So technically he hasn't won in almost a decade or 5 years. He hasn't won in a long time. His last 2 fights against legit competition were brutal, one-sided. So he doesn't deserve a shot, but because he's a huge star and because he's one of the few guys that will sell a ton of pay-per-views, he is being thrust into this spot that he really doesn't deserve to be in. And there are plenty of other guys who've been fighting regularly and consistently and doing well, including Stipe, who has had the most title defenses, I think, in history at heavyweight. That's my issue, is just that they spent so much time and effort legitimizing the sport only to then fall back on these antics that, short term they might get buys, but I just, if you want entertainment, then watch the WWE. If you want a legitimate sport where people are competing against each other, you have to build that. And I just think it does a disservice to the sport.
Now, what about for the sake of DC, who's given his career to wrestling, MMA, and this is his retirement fund. This is his, he's given a lot. This is his fight where he gets to make a ton of money, take care of his family, never have to work again.
Okay, fair enough. I think that there is an argument to be made personally.
Plus, DC1, he wanted this. He was like a kid in a candy store. He was so happy.
What I love about DC is there's some videos online you can find of him, like, he's about to fight Josh Barnett, and they're sitting chatting, like fanboying out about pro wrestling and stuff. So he's legitimately a fan of pro wrestling, and it's fun to watch. And look, you can't
the story where him and Kane went to WrestleMania dressed in the Lucha Libre.
Yeah. So you can't begrudge him wanting that big payday, and anybody is going to want that. And so I think in that way, I get it. He's been in the sport for a while, but I think there's a larger issue of the UFC and Bellator and the other major MMA organizations. There's a larger issue of them playing to the kind of lowest common denominator and kind of pulling off these antics that are kind of short-term gain, but I think long-term they do damage. So if this was a one-time thing, I'd be fine with it. But the fact of the matter is that they make move after move where clearly it's like, all right, what's going to put butts in seats now? And they put a lot of stock in Conor McGregor and a lot of stock in Ronda Rousey and in fighters who ended up, for whatever one reason or another, not panning out long term. And I think they could have spent more time like they did in the early mid 2000s or late 2000s, where they built a group of fighters who even to this day will sell pay-per-views, even though they're older and they shouldn't, they're not competitive with the higher level guys. So
why was Chuck Liddell so famous?
Huh?
Why was Chuck Liddell so famous? What did he do to earn that?
Knock people out.
He fought. He fought, and he didn't say much, but he was just cool and
but
one of the most popular.
And they did a great job for a while. They did an
Anderson
amazing.
Didn't even speak English.
There was a long time where they did an amazing job promoting fighters, and I think at some point they got away from they got away from the model of we're going to promote these interesting people who have personalities in their own right, but we're going to build this group of fighters in every weight class. There were fighters that you wanted to see, and now we're at a point where we don't really have that anymore.
Well, and here's this, and we'll end with this. Here's sort of the sad part is that there's actually a ridiculous talent crop.
Well,
they have more talent than they have ever had.
Yeah.
The divisions are so stacked. The young kids coming up who have really, a lot of them have fun, quirky personalities, are certainly marketable, and yet they devolve into pro wrestling. So I'm happy. I sort of agree with you. I'm happy with the fact that DC is going to make a lot of money. That's. But I'm glad that he will. But I agree that overall it's short-term gains instead of developing from the ground up.
Agreed. Well, that transitions nicely into our discussion with our interview for today with Tom Seabourne, who, among many other things, is a martial artist, but he's also an author, a PhD, cyclist, an avid cyclist, a Guinness World Record holder. Just a number of things. I'm not even going to try to list the accolades.
Interesting guy. And
very interesting.
We had a great conversation. So here's our interview with Tom. Hey, everyone. We are here with Tom Seabourne. Hey, Tom. How's everything?
Hey, great. Thank you guys for letting me come on your great podcast.
Oh, of course, yes, and thank you for coming on. So Tom is truly a Renaissance man. Like, I don't think there's anything this guy has not done or accomplished. He's a PhD. He's an author, right? I believe you hold a world record as well, right? Just does everything. Really, a remarkable gentleman.
Well, thank you. That's a nice introduction, but it's something where when I was 11 years old, I made up my mind I wanted to do something with my life, and just kind of kept on going since then.
Awesome. Well, I guess that kind of segues us a little well into, we always kind of initially with any guest, we want to get a little bit of background on your own kind of athletic history, starting from if you started sports as a kid, if you started as an adult, we kind of want to get an idea of like where was your start with fitness, and then kind of how that expanded to what it's become.
Okay. Well, it did start when I was 11. I was at a party, and a guy said, turn the music down, and I said, turn it up. And he said, let's go outside. So we go outside, and he takes off his shoes. So I had no idea, and so I took off my shoes, and he threw a perfectly placed roundhouse kick to my groin. And that's when I knew. I just crumbled. So I knew the next day I started taking karate. I was living on the island of Okinawa. My dad was in the service. So I went to it's called a Seabourne dojo, and never missed a workout, 6 nights a week, 2 hours a night, and loved it. Not for the self-defense, but once I got involved, the discipline. And in answer to your question, we as, being over there I was over there for 3 years. So eventually got my brown belt and started teaching the underbelts, and realized that's what I wanted to do with my life, was teach. And so that's what I'm doing today.
So I got a I'm trying to get this visual. Justin and I both practice martial arts at different levels. How did he throw a roundhouse kick to your groin? I'm just trying to figure. Was it like because typically you think of a kick to the groin as straight up, but did he actually throw a roundhouse to the groin? I don't know why I'm trying to figure out this visual. Maybe
we have our semantics different. Roundhouse to me is what you might call a wheel kick.
Okay.
It's just, it can be perfectly thrown, and he hit me with the ball of his foot. I mean, it was perfect. In fact, his name, if he's listening right now, is Dale Marcoux. I remember like yesterday because it changed my life. Because karate changed my life, and that's I started taking karate. Came back to the States. There were no school. We moved back to Allentown, Pennsylvania. There were no karate schools in the vicinity. But then, miraculously, a taekwondo studio opened up less than 200 yards from my house. I mean, how providential was that? So I go down there, and the head instructor, Sun Ho Chang, allows me to teach the beginners, and then what he would do would allow me to attend the advanced classes. And that's when I started competing in the taekwondo events internationally, and had a great time with that. And you were asking about athletic career. Made a big mistake. I did a full contact fight on a week's notice. In fact, it's on my Facebook page. But I got a phone call.
I thought you were saying that it was on your face. I'm like, yeah, that's what would happen if I only took a week to prepare. You would see it on my face.
Yeah, I mean but when you're a kid, and I was early 20s when I took the fight. I mean, the fight turned out okay. I ended up fighting a guy. I weighed 190. He weighed about 260. He was an ex-football player. But if you watch the fight, and I have a little bit of it on my Facebook page, but I was able to stay away and just kick hard to the body, and so no problems with that. But I lost my amateur status with the taekwondo and the Olympics and all that. So that was kind of the ruination of my career. And as you guys know, being in martial arts, I look at taekwondo now as a joke when I watch it on TV. I don't know if you guys watch it in the Olympics, but
I've tuned in a couple times, just out of curiosity.
So what I'm interested because so I do Muay Thai and Justin's done judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, some Muay Thai as well. So what about it now is a kind of travesty to you?
Yeah, they changed the rules, and unfortunately, it's now an electronic scoring system. So all you have to do is touch your opponent with your front foot, and so it's the most boring sport in the world. I bet it won't make it through. The next Olympics is Japan, and karate is going to be an Olympic sport, and I'm guessing it's probably going to replace taekwondo because nobody wants to watch it anymore. In the blood and guts era of taekwondo was good. All we wore was a kind of a chest protector that you had to hit it to you made a sound, or you could knock the guy out. Everything was real. But the electronic scoring system has taken away all of the impact. And so, if you Google it, it's pretty much of a joke. And so there's a lot of us old timers that are trying to get it back to the old scoring system. But that's probably not going to happen because you know how politics are.
Yeah.
And it's already gone so far. So that's, unfortunately, I'm afraid taekwondo may be out the door of the Olympics, but we'll see.
It's funny you mentioned it. I hope this doesn't bore listeners of ours that aren't martial artists, but I have an interesting anecdote because with Muay Thai, when I started about 10 years ago. I know when I would spar or fight with guys that had a Taekwondo background but transitioned to Muay Thai, they were often incredibly difficult because they combined the kind of speed and dexterity that comes with Taekwondo with the aggression and kind of the power that comes with Muay Thai. But what I've noticed lately is that people and it just happened a couple weeks ago, where we had people that come in that come from a more recent Taekwondo background, and they don't seem to be able to transition to that aggression. And I guess because they're used to a point scoring system. And we actually had somebody recently who would kind of be kind of fancy with the kicks and land to score. But as soon as you pressured him and as soon as you gave him a couple hard shots, he would fold because I guess he's not used to that grind and not used to no, a fight's a fight. Like you don't just get to tap somebody and run away. If you get hit, you got to hurt the person. And so I it's funny that you mentioned because I never put two and two together, but I have definitely noticed a shift in the style of fighting from people who do make that transition from Taekwondo over to Muay Thai.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. There's no toughness anymore. It's a game, and it's a sad game. The old days of point karate was a lot physically tougher than the traditional Taekwondo of today. So, yeah, unfortunately, unless something's done about it, it'll just keep getting worse and worse. But sorry to start on such a sour note. But
that's great for us.
For what it's worth, really all sports martial arts have gone in the direction of so many rules and regulations and this and that. Judo, which is an Olympic sport as well, has changed so much where there's certain throws you can't do, and if you grab someone in a certain part of their gi for 2 seconds, you have to do this or you get penalized. And, wrestling has made it where they're just forcing, aggression, which is okay, but there's so many rules. And for what it's worth, even mixed martial arts now has a lot of rules compared to when it was just two guys and go in a cage, don't eye gouge and do whatever you want, basically, which there's a morbid curiosity about that. We admit that it's a better sport today than it was, although there is certainly something exciting about that. But really, I feel that that's the direction all combat, real, and for what it's worth, all sports for the most part have now become really rule based, really statistic based, just everything. It's sort of taken this magic out of sports. Right, like baseball is a prime example of that, where it was just you go out there, the pitcher would throw till he couldn't throw, hitters would try to hit. Now they have so much analysis and just so many statistics and this and do that. It's like, is it more enjoyable to watch? I know that they're trying to win, and there's so much money that goes into it now that they have to do this. But really, is it more fun than it used to be? So that's my view on it.
No, you're right. I agree with everything you just said. And, there's a lot of it's happening in the name of safety. And I agree with safety for the young kids.
Sure.
The kids playing football to guard against the head injuries. But when we're talking about professional athletes and, they've decided to take that road, then, when you start adding these rules that take so much away from the sport, then people won't watch it pretty soon. So Taekwondo will be the first to go, and then others will follow probably.
So a little question that's a little off topic. Have you watched the YouTube series Cobra Kai?
Oh no!
It's a
I can't
continuation
wait,
of the
though.
Karate
That's
Kid. There was one moment.
Yeah.
It's basically a continuation. They're all they're middle-aged guys now. Johnny he's living his life, and Tony, he's living his. Well, it's just funny. And there's one part where he's like, back in the '80s, before all that concussion nonsense, when you did karate, you fought hard. I just thought that was hilarious.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna definitely catch that. That looks like it'll be a great whatever they call a sequel or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It looks great.
Yeah, no, it is. So let's talk a little about your own kind of professional career. Like, where did you start your own kind of when did you decide that you were going to pursue fitness as a career to the PhD level?
Well, I started when I was at Penn State. I was majoring in exercise science, and I was on the tennis team, and I was not a good tennis player. I was number 6, and I had a lot of psychological problems on the court. I don't know if you're watching Wimbledon at all, but it's so much a mental game, and that was my downfall in tennis, where there was too much time between points for me to screw around with my head, and by the time the next point came, I'd be in some other place with my brain. So anyway, I had it was I'm trying to remember, it was an anatomy class where the instructor was the coach of the volleyball team, and he said, "Hey, is there any volunteers who would like to be hypnotized?" And I raised my hand because I thought I need something. So he hypnotized me once a week to try to improve my tennis performance. And it really didn't help. To be honest with you, I was such a bad player. You can't improve beyond someone's potential. I didn't have the talent in tennis, but that's when I became infatuated with sports psychology, where I decided, hey, I'm going to pursue that. So that's when I decided to go to University of North Texas, worked under a great major professor, and got a PhD in sports psych. And I thought I was going to work with a professional team. That's what all sports psychologists want in the beginning, but that never came about. I don't know if you've noticed, there's very few sports psychologists on professional teams. There's amateurs, like in the Olympics, they all have somebody as a, quote, sports psychologist. But so then I just went into general fitness, meaning I teach at a college. I teach at a junior college, and I've had opportunities, University of Pennsylvania, Penn State, to go back and teach there. But I fell in love down here with this, and I've been here for 32 years now.
Wow. So with the sports psychology, why don't you think it's really been adapted at like the professional level with the major teams?
Well, here's my guess, and you tell me what you think. But let's say the sports psychologist says, "Hey, Troy Aikman, you're not looking good on our battery of exams that we did this week. I think you should take the week off." Coach says, "Hey, sports psychologist, you're out of a job." I think that's part of it. I honestly do. I think professional sports, they're there to win, and a sports psychologist, if they're not helping the team win, then they're gone. So I'm assuming that's part of it. But that's a good question. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess that sounds good, because I would it's one of those things. I definitely have heard of plenty of individual sport athletes who work individually with sports psychologists. So it's just something I never considered. I just thought that would just be part of major sports teams. So I never didn't realize that that's not a case, because I know of and have heard of many fighters, tennis players. Again, it's athletes that kind of, to an extent, can kind of create their own schedule and have to build their own teams, definitely benefit from it. But yeah, I never heard, didn't realize that it's not really employed much with any of the major kind of pro teams.
Yeah. And so what I did, when I moved to Mount Pleasant, which is a very small town in East Texas, and I became a generalist. So I decided that, you have most people, if they want to be successful, they become very specific in what they want to do, like, be the best sports psychologist or whatever. But in a small town, then I decided I'm going to change my whole focus and try to become as good as I can at all different facets of fitness. So I got involved with all the different certifications and began teaching in the fitness industry, traveling every weekend, and did all that for about 10 years. But then the travel became so tedious. I don't know. Some of my friends, I don't know how they do it. I don't know if you guys do much travel, but from what I'm hearing, the airport situation is no better than it was 10 years ago. Is that true?
It depends on where you travel out of. We're in New York, so it's always kind of a nightmare. But I traveled internationally about a month ago, and I flew out of kind of this obscure airport, a little upstate New York, and that was a breeze. So I think to some extent it just depends on like where you're traveling out of, but it definitely isn't pleasant, especially if you're going through a major airport.
3 letters and a word. TSA PreCheck. If you travel a lot, do it. It's like, say, $70 or something, and then you can just walk on through. So if you travel a lot, right, in the United States, especially if you're in Los Angeles or New York, hubs, right, highly recommended.
Yeah, that's great to remember. Well, anyway, one more thing about this small town. There's nothing to do, so that's when I decided to start riding my bike. And I started riding in 1988. Yeah, 1988. And by 1 year later, I mean, this sounds crazy. I can't even believe that this happened, but I was looking at the numbers. I entered my first huge race. Have you ever heard of the Race Across America?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bike race. You start with your back wheel in the Pacific and finish with your front wheel in the Atlantic, and you can sleep as little or as long as you like. And it used to be profiled on Wide World of Sports. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. That was an old TV program, but but now it gets no publicity. I mean, the race just happened in June. I forget what date, but this guy just rode his bike. The guy who won. He finished in 8 days and 1 hour riding over 3,000 miles. And no one knows about it because it doesn't seem, there's no publicity. It's kind of an underground, I think, of crazy cyclists. But I got bitten by that bug. It was one of those things where the first race I entered was a 60-mile race, and then a 100-mile race, then a 500-mile race, and then the Race Across America was 3,000 miles. And it took me 10 days, 3 hours, and 32 minutes, but it was an epic adventure. I highly recommend for any listeners who are really addicted to endurance sports. In fact, Outside Magazine calls it the toughest sporting event in the world. I don't know if I'd say that, but it's just the reason they said that is so few people finish the race. When those that start, so few people finish.
Yeah.
But that became an addiction for me for years, where I just entered long distance races, and it became something where and I don't know about what you guys think about this, but that was my most creative time when I was pedaling training in East Texas, and I'm riding for hours, and I'm thinking of cool stuff, and I come back and I write it down. And as you mentioned, I've written many books. Most of those books were written in my head when I was riding on the roads of East Texas. So I think everybody, whether it's riding a bike or walking, just those are the best times to contemplate and to figure out what you want to do next with your life. At least that was it for me.
I definitely agree to an extent that while I'm working out, ideas come. Sadly for me, the most creative moments are when I'm on the, in the facilities. So I know I'm not the only one who said that before, but so my moments of, great moments of creativity are fleeting. So, but yes, no, definitely it's true.
So actually, interesting. I don't know what podcast. I don't remember because it was about a year ago. But there was maybe it was This American Life or Radio Lab or some podcast did an episode on that race, and it was following a group, and I gotta find it because I remember I remember it being compelling. And that was where I heard about it. But yeah, you're right. As far as now, like it is obscure, and that unless you're into cycling, I don't think anyone would hear about it.
Do you think that perhaps endurance races, that's clearly like the sexy ones, the marathons, certain Olympic races get a lot of publicity, but sort of these underground, I guess what you would call underground races, maybe certain triathlons, just really tough sports to participate in, might not get the I guess the publicity, or not necessarily the credit, but just the people aren't paying attention to it because of certain things that are sexy, like the Spartan race or CrossFit, like these sort of really sort of well-marketed races or events that drag people in, that you could train for it and then you can go and then it's done and you have this clear goal and then you're done and you can happy with your team, as opposed to a bike race across the country, which is amazing, but it's hard. You'd say if you finish in the middle of the pack, you say you finished it, which is great, but it just doesn't. Perhaps to some people, it just doesn't sound as cool as I finished a Spartan race with my team.
Yeah. I think you said a couple of really important things. Number one, I think the most important thing is that you said is well marketed. And you're right, to cover the Race Across America logistically, imagine, riding across country with TV cameras or whatever. So that in itself would make it a tough spectator sport. No, but I think you're absolutely right with what you just said. And along that line for your listeners, and this is something that I don't know if you guys have seen this research, but it's scary and it's happened to me, and that is up until my 40s, I had no problems physically, absolute, wonderful, Then boom, everything hit. Like you probably have heard of atrial fibrillation. You all have heard of that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I went to a cardiologist, and he said that all the endurance work that I had done caused scarring of the heart. And I had no idea that was happening when I was training and racing. And now I'm seeing a lot of my colleagues who were on the bike a lot like me. They're developing this AFib and AFlutter. So I've had 2 ablations so far. A cardiac ablation is where they go in through your groin and they actually burn parts of your heart that are causing the irregular signal. And fortunately, it's a cure. And I, knock on wood, I'm still riding my bike and I'm, quote, cured. But wow, I no longer recommend to people to do what the kind of craziness that I did for years of riding. Literally, I'd be riding 8 hours a day. I know it sounds, how could you do that? Well, I'd schedule my day so that, I'd ride in the morning before anybody was up, and I'd ride at lunchtime, and I'd ride in the evening. And I had literally ridden over 1 million miles. We did the calculations. And imagine what that does to human beings, to our hearts. We're not designed, this is what I'm discovering now. I wish I'd have known it before. We're not designed for these multi-day, crazy, high, not just piddling along, but, pushing your maximum heart rate for day after day and only sleeping 2 hours a night. So anyway, I kind of push people away from that kind of thing. Or if they do it once and then say you've done it, but don't keep doing it for years like some of us.
Yeah, my uncle is a big marathon runner. He's he's early mid 60s, but he's run dozens of marathons as far as I know, and he actually had to have bypass surgery not too long ago, and he's one of the healthiest people I know. Like, he's been vegetarian and clean eating for who knows how long, and in addition to running all the time. And it's like that. It's crazy that can happen to somebody, that you think, wow, I'm just doing tons of cardio and it's so healthy. How could that happen? So it's
right.
scary.
Yeah, it's like and you guys, I'm sure, preach to the choir when you're telling people that moderation, even in fitness, you can overtrain and everything. And
one thing, the kind of obsession, I guess, with cycling did get you is a Guinness World Record. So can you tell us a little bit about the record and how it came about?
Yeah, this was crazy. Okay, in 2007. Okay, I did the Race Across America in 1990, and that's when I finished in 10 days. And then 17 years later, I decided to try it again. You know, after developing a lot of physical ailments, I thought, I still want to do this. So I got together this really sparse support crew of only 3 people, and everybody else has at least 6 to 10. And long story short, made it halfway across the country, ran out of money. So I thought, okay, because it's a really expensive race. I mean, you got to have probably, in 1990, I got across on 6,000, which was written up in the book as the cheapest ever to get across. You should have about 10 grand before you decide to do this thing. But so that was 2007. And then in 2008, I decided I'm going to try to raise money for the Race Across America by trying to set a Guinness World Record on a stationary bike. So I flew up to Chicago. We were going to do it during the Chicago Marathon at their convention center. Flew up there, all ready to go, but then at the last minute, our camera was stolen, and we didn't have the medical witnesses that had to be there 24/7. So I fly back to Texas, dejected, completely thinking, it's over. But then a revelation. I thought, why not just do it at the college where I teach, with the medical personnel, all the nursing students, they wouldn't be able to do that. So long story short, I rode a stationary bike for 185 hours, which I know that sounds like a lot. It's a little over 7 days.
Wow.
And you were asking a little bit about it. I was allowed off the bike 5 minutes every hour. But instead of doing that, I banked those minutes so that I could sleep for an hour and 15 minutes every morning from 4 to 5:15. So imagine after day 6, that's when the hallucinations started. I mean, bad hallucinations. I mean, if I'd have known back then how bad sleep deprivation can affect your physiology, I may not have done it. But anyway, we did set the record. It was when I say we, boy, you talk about needing a support crew. For every event like Race Across America or Guinness World Record, you need people to help you, and without them, I wouldn't have been able to stay on the bike. So it was hats off to them. But I'm sure, and I haven't even followed it, but I'm sure that record has been broken. You know how Guinness thing is, and believe me, the hardest part about that, if you're ever considering doing anything with Guinness, the logistics of you have to have a camera 24/7. They require so much. So that was the hardest part, to be honest with you.
Yeah, actually, a while back, early on in my days as a trainer, there was a guy that would come into my gym, and he would literally just come in and just do an hour's worth of crunches, and then he'd leave, and he'd come back and do an hour's worth of crunches, and he'd leave, and it was just this regular thing until one day the manager was like, hey, I forget the guy's name, and he was like, hey, why don't you just try for the Guinness World Record? And the guy didn't speak English very well, so the manager, Anthony, he just went about like get it fit, doing the whole process. And it was like, we needed media and we needed a camera the whole time, and you needed so there were three of us. I was one of them with those little clickers, and we're just clicking away for the whole hour. But he broke the world record for crunches in an hour. But then a year later, somebody broke that, but I forget the exact numbers, but if he did 6,000, somebody then the next year did 10,000. So yeah, it's one of those things that I guess, once someone gets a certain number, then, people come out of the woodworks to try to break it. But that's still, it's insane that, so my question is, how do they come up with what was the reasoning behind giving you the 5 minutes, or, how do they come up with what's the rationale behind what their parameters are?
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is that when I had to call London first. That was the hardest part for them to answer the phone. Yeah. And then they asked me my address, so they sent me this packet of information. And apparently since this, and I got to admit, it was a crazy. I was fortunately sponsored by, I don't know if you've heard of Full Strength, Sean Phillips, but he was behind it. He helped me, but he made some really funny comments in some of his writings afterwards of like, pedaling to nowhere and mind-numbing experience, which is absolutely what it was. It was crazy. But yeah, they sent me this packet of information because the record had been done before. If it would have been a new thing, then I don't know, maybe they would have had compromises. But no, I had to follow everything, 3 witnesses in the room at all time, and then 1 medical witness, so that's 4 people in the room at all time. They had to sign all this paperwork, a camera rolling 24/7. And, crazy things happened. Like, I guess it was day 4. See, I would change the seat every few hours because imagine that was the toughest part, meaning that's touching the bike and your hands and my forearms using a aero bar. Yeah. So I would just change the seat and that would alleviate any problems. But then the seat got stuck, and so that became a huge issue where I developed saddle sores. It's, where you're chafing and bleeding, and so that became a huge issue. But we got through that. And I was on a liquid diet so that I wouldn't have to run to the bathroom, right? So this is at a small college. And what we configured this, I used a wrestling mat, and I could, with my left hand, bring the mat around me so no one could see me while I had a little tennis can that I would urinate into every maybe hour and a half, whatever, because I'm drinking this full-strength product for the rest of that's all. No solid food. So we have this bag of urine-filled tennis ball cans ready to, we needed to throw them away. So I had one of my support crew guys, he picks up the bag, and you can imagine, boom, it rips, all the tennis ball cans explode open. Yeah, right there. Unbelievable. So anyway, we had some incidents like that, and one girl caught me, she'll never forget this scene in her life, but she was supposed to wake me up at like 5:15, but I was already awake, and I was going from my sleeping bag, but I had no clothes, to the locker room, and she catches me, and I jump and turn around. Poor girl is scarred for the rest of her life. So really, it was a lot of funny little things that happened, but unfortunately, they didn't let me know that I had set the record until May of that same year. We did the thing in December, and the Race Across America is June, so I wasn't able to use any sponsorship. So anyway, that the whole purpose went kind of down the tubes. But it was, to be honest, like it was an adventure, and getting all of those college personnel. I mean, it's like that's what's the amazing part. To get all these people to come out at like 3 a.m, 2 a.m. to be witnesses, and that always is what makes things fun in life. Where other people are involved with you.
Sure. So you talked earlier about the books that you've written, and your most recent one is called Glitches to Gold, Live Like a Champion. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Yeah, it's really talking about how to deal with adversity. And we've already discussed a little bit about adversity here, and we all do it. We all have to deal with it. And I wrote it from a first-person perspective that, I don't know how many times I've reinvented myself, over the years, from one, going from one thing to another. And we all have to do that in order to keep going and stay alive, actually. What I've noticed in my life, and I just kind of figured this out recently, for anything good to have happened, something bad happened before it. And when I say bad, something very challenging before something good. And I don't know if that's with everybody, but I decided to just sit down and chronicle it, just write it. And that's what I did with Glitches into Gold. And there's some fitness stuff in there too, discussing the diet, all the crazy eating programs that I've been on for different things over the years, and then the exercise and the overtraining and just putting it all together into kind of a novel so that it doesn't flow like, okay, I've written, as you said, I've written other books, and many of them are didactic, like Athletic Abs, or another book, Mind, Body, Fitness. So those books are kind of to help you, step by step to reach your goals. But this one is more about you read about these experiences and then come up with your own ideas about how it might help you. So that's why I wrote it. And anyway, it was fun. It was a very cathartic experience, and that's why I kind of recommend everybody do their own Glitches to Gold book. Wow. Call it a different title. Yeah.
So it's funny because it sounds very GymWitsian to talk about your experience and then sort of create a philosophy, read it, writing your own experiences, reading about someone else's, and sort of coming up with these ideas. Funny, Ryan and I often talk about writing a book, and the discussion is always, well, is a publisher going to be interested in something that is a little esoteric, right? Everyone wants the, keys to a flat stomach, or, get into shape, or eat, this, in 3 weeks, or this diet for a better life. They want things like that, and for what it's worth, they sell. So it's sort of a discussion that Ryan and I have had about to write our philosophies down and whether or not people would be interested. And so along those lines, if you while we're in the self-help world, and Ryan and I recently did the National Publicity Summit, which was really cool, and we met some good people there, and we've interviewed a lot of people and sort of played in that world of self-help, and I guess we would be a part of that world. We're helping people, but this self-help sort of has. I still think about it this way. I remember as I was a kid, and as now, it has this sort of this vibe to it that, for me, is very uncomfortable, right? It's people, all these sort of this ultra forced positivity, and I'm all about being positive. Like, you cannot be negative and really succeed. It's just pessimism is really not healthy. I mean, like, everyone gets pessimistic on occasion, but this sort of almost forced positive and everything's great and achieve this and 8 steps to the to your goals and just sort of this. It feels so forced. And then I remember when I was a kid, the infomercials with Tony Robbins and saying, you can achieve this greatness with it. And these sort of, like, if you think about it, that's strange. They give you these methods, but that's sort of esoteric too, but it's packaged differently. But you're not like that. You don't preach these 8-step methods or this ultra positivity. What do you think about that world, and how did you come to your disposition right now, your views on self-help, and sort of what it really is, and sort of what all that other stuff is? Sorry, I just gave you. I just totally threw a mouthful at you.
No, you just read my mind. I mean, that's exactly what has happened throughout my career. I like I said, I did those self-help books. I worked with the Complete Idiot Guide series and wrote 5 books with them, and very didactic, very structured, what you just said. And this is why I did the Glitches into Gold, because I'm not preaching, and I'm just explaining the experiences and letting the readers come to their own conclusions. And in answer to your question about a publisher, here's my opinion. Okay, ironically, while I was writing Glitches into Gold, I was working on a product. I've done several abdominal books on abdominals, and I was thinking about a product to help people. You know how America is so sedentary, and it's worse than ever, and people sit around all day, and maybe they go to the gym for an hour, but they're sitting so long that you've heard the statement, it's worse than smoking.
Oh, so yeah, we talk about that all the time.
Yes, it's horrible. So I came up with this device and thought about marketing it, and then while I was doing the research on it, I turned this research into a book that's coming out September 1st called Your Best Abs, and it's basically techniques that have you guys heard of Stuart McGill?
Yes. Yeah. Stuart McGill's
I love
one of the best.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, I love him, and what I did was I took a lot of his precepts and then put my own little spin on it, and gave him credit, of course, but came up with a kind of not a new abdominal workout, but something that's a little different than what's out there right now. The crunches, the sit-ups, the planks, and all that. But anyway, getting back to the point is that the didactic tell people what to do. And the self-help, I'm laughing to myself while you're saying that, because my mother, she had all the Wayne Dyer books and and I'm thinking, she's a worrier, and so am I. And I thought, did that really help her? And not really, all these books that purport. Now, I've heard really good things about Anthony Robbins. Is it Anthony Robbins?
Yeah.
Tony Robbins, Tony
Robbins.
Robbins. I've heard some good things about him, so I would never, castigate someone who may be helping the world.
Sure,
but I know what you mean.
And this does help people for sure. There are lots of people that are affected very positively by Tony Robbins and similar courses.
Yes, but so that's the point. Yeah, it's kind of like, but like you're saying, it's almost like the market is saturated by that. And I think you guys have a good idea. Write a book about your philosophy, and believe me, if you have some good material in there, you'll find a publisher. That's what I did. I wrote the whole thing, and then I didn't find a publisher easily. I admit it. Of all the books I've ever written, this is the hardest to find a publisher, but I did finally find one. So you guys will too. I mean, because you have the credibility of the podcast, so you'll have that going for you as well, big time.
So, can you tell us a little bit about, like, when it comes to your own fitness and health and exercise, like, what is your philosophy of fitness? We always kind of like to ask that as pseudo philosophers. We always kind of like to know what our guests kind of what their own kind of fitness philosophy is.
Well, and here's where I truly believe it's different for every single person, and here's what I mean. Experts would say that I overtrain still, even though I'm in my early 60s, but I love training, and I've found a way that I can do it every day without orthopedic injuries, and I no longer have the heart issues, and so I'm going to do it every day. But I tell my students at the college, I tell them what the research says, twice a week for strength training, cardio a few times a week, depending on your goals. And then eating properly is most important. Stretching is very important, especially as you get older. And I continue to stretch every day. And then, the part that is missing for a lot of people is the emotional, spiritual, which I think if that's not there, then the rest goes down the tubes. So, yeah, in answer to your question about philosophy, it's putting all of that together into a workable program that you're, unlike, a lot of your listeners may, okay, I'll go backwards and say, have you guys seen that show, Your Strange Addiction?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you watch it much, but I think in 2012 I was profiled on there because I first contacted the Discovery Channel where I wanted them to cover that world record that I was doing. And at first they said yes, but then when they found they'd have to drive to Mount Pleasant and stay there for a week, they said it's too expensive. So the lady who was the, program director or something for the Discovery Channel, she then joined this TLC network, and she remembered me, and so she said, hey, why don't you be on My Strange Addiction? And at first I declined, and then she sent me some clips of, because I had never even seen the show. And she sent me clips of a weightlifter. I don't know if you saw that clip, or and then a runner. And they looked a little weird. They had psychologists. And so I asked her point blank, I said, look, is this going to be the real truth, or is this going to be, making me look like a madman? And she said, oh, no. We're just going to film you for 4 days, and it'll be the truth. Well, they filmed for 4 days, and they didn't say why I was training. I was on my bike like 8 hours a day, but they didn't say why. They didn't say he had a race coming up. So it made me look like a madman, someone who's just always on his bike. So the reason I brought that up is that people are so different. I mean, like you said, you have a lot of listeners who are addicted to exercise. But what I wanted to show people in that episode was that, yes, I know this will sound crazy, in order to ride your bike 8 hours a day, in order to train for Race Across America, you don't overtrain for Race Across America. You you got to be comfortable on your bike 22 hours a day. So I wanted to be addicted to exercise for me to achieve the goal of completing that race. And, and here's the funny thing, which I don't know if people realize. For cycling anyway, I'm not saying necessarily for smoking or narcotics or whatever, but I was able to quit my addiction to cycling immediately after I decided that I no longer had ultra endurance as a goal. So I no longer train that crazily anymore because my goal had changed. So anyway, that's the point I wanted to make, that we're all, as far as a philosophy of fitness, I don't ever put anybody down. We're all in our absolute universe of, why does someone work out? Why does someone seem to be training all the time? Why does someone not want to do anything? But I think if people were exposed to something that they love, whether it be walking or pedaling, and just let them do it a few minutes a day, then it becomes habit, then they become, quote, addicted, and then they'll be healthier and enjoy it. So that's my philosophy.
Sounds like a pretty sound philosophy, and certainly something that we can all really abide by, listen to. Find something that you love that's good for you, and do it. I think that's it sounds simple, but it's a pretty powerful philosophy. So now, where can people find you?
Oh, I guess the easiest way is Facebook, because I have a website, but I love when people message me or, just if they have a post they want to put up there. Yeah, and that's the easiest way. It's just Great. Tom Seabourne on Facebook.
Fantastic. And so Glitches to Gold is out currently, and you have another book coming in September. What's the book? What is the title of the book coming in September? Do you have the title?
Yeah, it's called Your Best Abs.
That's right, Your Best Abs. Okay.
And what I was going to say about that you might be interested in, it's a way to train the core without doing sit-ups, without doing crunches, without ever going to the floor. And it's a way to train the core, which is the way it should be. Your abdominal muscles are designed to resist spinal extension, not to do flexion of spine over and over and over. And I'm using McGill's words right now. And so anyway, I'm using easy techniques that you just practice several times a day that will train the core, and in my opinion, the way it was designed to be trained.
Yeah, that's great. I haven't read the book, but just hearing you say that, you get definitely certification from me, because I think that's a big issue we have when it comes to all the ab stuff, is that it's so focused on spinal flexion to the point where I think it could be problematic for most people. If at a minimum it's useless, and at worst it could be causing injuries. So that sounds great.
Yes, and that's why I give it all to Stuart McGill, and everybody listening should just Google him and look at his books and look at his videos, and then you'll realize you'll never do another sit-up again after watching his videos.
Well, Tom, thank you so much. It was a great conversation. You definitely have a different approach than a lot of our guests. I thought it was it was entertaining to be a part of.
Oh, it was my pleasure, and it was truly an honor to be on your program. And whenever it comes out, I'd love to broadcast it out there on Facebook and all my social media. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
So I know we always say this, but that really was a fun, very interesting conversation.
Yeah. So now you've given up that we lie about it most of the time? No. Actually,
we have. That was it was just unique because Tom does live in the self-help world. He's published books, and he's given strategies to helping people with their fitness or whatever it is, motivation. But he has a different demeanor.
Yeah,
we've had a lot of self-help people on the show, and not that it's bad, but they have this sort of demeanor, and they have these systems, 6 steps to doing this, and they have these methods, and that just wasn't his style.
Yeah.
He was down to earth, and to me, he was very relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this isn't I get charged with not being energetic enough sometimes in class. Well, like when I teach classes, that I am more straightforward. And as I've talked about before, that sometimes for some people they want me to be more bouncing off the walls, but for me that's not me. And so I think for some people there's I don't want to say phony, but there is a clear kind of projection of energy that's not really there. Like there's some people who are just high energy and super positive, and then there's some that you can tell they're kind of forcing it a little bit. And I like that he is really knowledgeable and engaging, but takes it from the perspective of it's more real. And I think I was going to say at some point, like for someone who's cynical like me, if somebody's too high energy, like too overwhelmingly positive, I just think it's BS. So it's kind of like I like that his demeanor and his approach is much more realistic, but it's motivating. Like when you hear the stuff he does, clearly there's motivation and there's drive. You have to have that, and it makes you want to do something. I don't know about doing a coast to coast bike ride, but it does make you want to get up and get be active. So I think I really enjoyed it. I mean, I think I enjoy all of our interviews. I think we generally have a good time. So it's always fun. But I definitely like that his kind of perspective is definitely more in line with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's that. Like Ryan crept back from the mic.
Yeah, exactly. Like I sat back and said, all right, Justin could do something, and he's nothing
that's
to say.
it. It's like, no, you're right. So
yeah, all right. And we probably talked your ear off about martial arts and all this stuff, MMA and everything today. So with that, as you know, go to thegymwits.com for all of our stuff, for social media, Instagram, all that good stuff. thegymwits.libsyn.com to fill out the survey and help us out. If you haven't rated us on iTunes, please do that. It helps us infinitely. We're getting lots and lots more listeners, but we need your new listeners. We need your help in getting us ranked high so that we can get some of that iTunes love. So Apple Podcasts love. So
continue to
help us
write
out.
in your
And
questions.
write in your questions for Ask the Trainer. We'll be recording an Ask the Trainer episode a little bit later today. So definitely send your questions in. Obviously, you're going to miss the next one, but we do them pretty regularly. We get a good deal of questions now, so we're always kind of redoing that type of episode. So that's it. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, a.k.a. Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And we are the GymWits.